Welcome to everyone. We're thrilled to have you here. The chat will be open throughout the reading, so if you want to make remarks about what you're hearing, you can put that in the chat, and I will provide the poets who are featured with the text of the conversation afterwards, so they don't have to try to keep up with the chat during their reading. So I'm going to start out with introducing our first featured poet, and his name is David Groff. He has a new book out called Live in Suspense. It's just been published by Trio House Press. His previous book, Clay, also from Trio House, was chosen by Michael Waters for the Louise Bogan Award. His first collection, named Theory of Devolution, was selected by Mark Doty for the National Poetry Series. David is a co-editor of Persistent Voices, Poetry by Writers Lost to AIDS, published by Allison, and Who's Your Daddy? Gay Writers Celebrate Their Mentors and Forerunners, published by University of Wisconsin Press. David is an independent book editor. He teaches poetry and publishing in the MFA Creative Writing program at the City College of New York. I'll be putting some information in the chat about David, including that little introduction and where you can purchase his books. But now I'm going to turn it over to you, David. Thank you for being here.
Judy, thank you. Thanks for that introduction and the opportunity to read with SoFloPoJo, which I have delighted in saying over the last days. It's so many rhymes and so few syllables. It's great, and I'm glad to be here and grateful to everyone who's zoomed in. I'm looking forward as well to Maggie Queenie's poetry in a few minutes as well. I am reading from my new book of poems, Live in Suspense. It's just from Trio House, just published this month, and it's exciting and a little scary to see it emerge into the world. As the title implies, I'm interested in how the more we live in not knowing what will happen next in our lives. We're suspended in unknowing, waiting for the next mortal thing to happen. So a lot of the poems you'll hear tonight are elegies for my mother and father and others, and they reflect the life as a queer man that I've had around HIV and AIDS, and my relationship of almost 27 years, which is itself a suspenseful experience. And I would hope that some of the poems you hear tonight can ultimately rest in suspense. The poems occur in different landscapes, and a number of them, I must confess and be straightforward, have to do with bugs. So you're going to hear at least 2 bug poems tonight. And in the book itself, there are a few birds, but there are a number of bugs. So I hope you'll enjoy them as they sweep through. This first poem is a bug poem, and it's called Desert Stink Beetle. I trust everyone can hear me okay, right? And I'm coming through? Mm-hmm. Great. Desert Stink Beetle. You who gave your wings for more water, evolving to adhere them to your thorax, until you become a shiny black capsule, a desert death reaper, a hearse of a bug, nosing the dirt as if you hunt your glasses, your butt in the air like a high rider, comically sober, soberly comic, your exhaust, your line of defense, the 20-inch ray of spray you emit to get the last word, a stink you survive that lets you survive. My darkling, my thick drop of unmooned night, let me persist as your species, submit my wings to my torso, commit myself to ground, make my diet detritus and shit, evolve to be unlovely, a black ruby of gloom, a fecal American scarab, behind my earth-bitten face, my breath all bad, my ass in the air, my moon, ready to let it out, ready to take it in. This next poem is in a very different landscape, and even I guess the time of year. It occurs in September, across, as you'll see, alongside a lake in Maine. And you should know that the town is a former slate mining town. And it's called Disbelieving These Deaths, I Go to Sit by Lake Hebron. A thunderstorm has spun from a near blue sky, then faded like a tantrum, the child sunny and unharmed. Warmth like a human's breath shrugs off the fall wind. The lake is only mildly disturbed. It didn't know the deceased, so its sympathies don't extend to empathy, and it's a lake, not a pathetic fallacy, though I try. I work to stay here, not to be netted to various keenings, hard to do even on a good day. In the shallows are the slabs of slate like coffins fallen off a truck, each one not containing a body I knew, although slate caskets irretrievable in water speak to me. They inform me that if I were really here, I'd notice the cloud very like a whale until it blossoms like a poppy fast. A chorus of dead from a chorus of caskets ought to open their lids and shoulder out their slabs to walk on water. My dead father would eye the lake for plops of fish he could catch and feel guilty for eating eye to eye, though he was dubious of lakes, preferring currents, local water strung to seas, which lets me see him as a river, bodies of water as bodies, as metaphors, including the Babylon water of weeping. My mother, city-born, should stride to me across the tidelessness, the wind revealing her girlish nape, and George, my most recent dead guy, cleared of the thunder behind his brow, and now rise right here, part of the democracy of day, along with Daniel Chrisman, 25, dead on 9/11, 18 years ago today, a man I know from a poster gladly diving at 43 into this crisp water, warmer than dying young. All my loves with AIDS, the guys who I drag everywhere, Ron, Len, Craig, Jay, Paul, Mark, John, Tom, Richard, the armada ghosting the cove, their wakes cut short, should land on the island I am. Hebron, the first city arid, blazes from across the ocean, its millennia of murders, histories bleeding into each other, torches and missiles and rifles like lake lightning. Children killed in cars or cages, they should splash. All of these once knew the word for lake, said lake, swam in a lake of genuine water, fell through the frosty metaphor of lake, their lips too blue and sown ever to say lake again. Here they are, none of them at all, evaporated out of time until I become a lake nobody swims in. Again, the trees tremble, the clouds lower their cliche of brow, the water snaps like a shroud. It is a day in September, more thunder to come. The lake is alive with togue, perch, and bass. You heard my parents in Lake Hebron. They come with me everywhere, and I've written a number of poems for my late mother and father, and go back, as many poets do, to childhood, partly to see where I am now. This poem is called The Changing Table. The wallpaper, blue with pink and white mums afloat above me, a baby sky, and I lying spread below, feet in the air, the table, the parts of me one with my mother's hands. And I feel in my brain a tiny growth, some new nerve blooming into a knowing that I know not her body, but this body, a learning of my lines. As those two mother hands, those probably necessary hands, the probably innocent hands like bees commandeer me, cheeks, penis, legs, brain. And here I am wafting to the wallpaper in a swarm of smoke, a little sacrifice, to lose myself in the sky of flowers, my body down there, a split seed pod. I fly up here my entire life. This poem is called You're in My Light. You're in my light, said my father to his boy when I leaned under his lamp, crawling against his wingback in my short joy. I never got that he meant I darkened his text, could never connect my shadow, his head bent. I thought I cast no shade, that my body was just myself, apprentice to his mass. But I had the shape to have made myself a power of dark. I thought I could see to read in any light God shed, sunlight or spark. Now he is dead, past text, no light at all in his lap. You're in my light and I can't see what's next, he says. I say back, you're in my light. and so we share our shade, both of us, light and its lack. This next poem is, I guess, also a child poem, but it takes me, I think, into the present. And I have to say that some poets may feel you get surprised when you write something. You don't know where you're going. And this poem is a surprise for me. It's called Where is the Lady? Where is the lady I was when I was 4? A stole of blanket around my neck, a purse of a pale exquisite on my wrist, my heels held high, toes sallied forth on stilettos of air. I, the loveliest mother's lovely friend, caught up in my designs, so dizzy with my perfume, I had to swan my cloud wherever it was I walked, no matter it was who looked, their distaste, a hazy buzz, almost undeterred, almost, by my father's regular scowl as he waved his flat palm down, a flash of a signal that said to drop my feet to the floor of the malehood that we shared. I, the child he wished would shed the girl like a dress, weight the pail with sand, run with the lift of kids, and keep an eye on the ball, the being my mother assured my father was a phase for this Dr. Spock of a kid. But also the puzzling son whose picture my father took, developed, and showed, whose photos are why I see the vision of who I was, the runaway fairy of child when ladyship swelled in me like a bodice or a bloodstream, until the purse no longer appealed, or the heels hurt too much to bear, or children began their games and shame was the weightiest mink. And I shrugged on the boy, incited to put aside the childish things of girls, boyishness his resort, who tethered himself to men, who loved not trucks but cars, not for their engines, but for the lushness of their lines, for the sleekness in their speed, who came to love his gun, who drove away whoever she was he might have been, not knowing who I could be then or could be now, this man who daily wears a suit that seems to fit his frame, his loafers almost light, who can almost locate the scent of the girl he sent to her room, dressing for her party, craving an invitation. Thank you. There are a number of poems in Live in Suspense that begin with the words days of, followed by year. And some of you may know that Konstantin Cavafy wrote a whole mess of those poems, a lot of them homoerotic memories of some delicate moment in the past. And James Merrill, Mark Doty have done that too, with Days of in the title. And I love Cavafy, as any red-blooded gay man kind of has to, but I have some issues with him. And I wanted to bring his poems into our time. So here's one of the Days of poems called Days of 1986. My suspect blood. Dr. Soroti filled a vial. I had to take myself down the grim avenue to the Board of Health in the cold spring evening, crosswalk after crosswalk as the sun sidled in. I saw hundreds of others like me bearing their blood, but inside their bodies. The vial, I wanted to pluck it from my backpack and prop it on top of a payphone or stash it in the trash can with the dead daily news, wanting no news, not even good news, all news, cleaving me from my brothers. But I kept taking steps, the street annoying with life, the sun incumbent, the storefronts bloody gold, until I had to enter the Board of Health to find an unguarded tray of vials and place mine among them, all of us numbered together an hour before. I went back into a city vital with night, the world a blade so cutting that at times I could feel. Thanks. In all three of my books, Theory of Devolution, and the second one, Clay, which is named after my husband, the reality of AIDS and HIV is in these poems, as you've heard. And there's just a lot of also about loving and connecting and in different landscapes and with different people. So this poem is maybe a little more fun, and it's definitely, if you have lived in New York City or in an apartment building, you may appreciate it. And I think you'll get the title pretty quickly. It's called 4:20 a.m. Into our window creeps a burning skunk from a story below. I don't wake up to debunk the marijuana minute of drifting up and out, or the solitary body fate that comes about when THC dopamines the dawn and nausea vaporizes into appetite. Let us pause a moment to appreciate the need a few have for the specific 1 or 2 burnt offerings cannabis provides. Hunger amid cancer, and for most, the slide into a being contained in ourself to thrive as one person sated for a bit. I felt that in 1995. We make the time we need to play alone. So downstairs in the dark, a guy gets stoned as Monday dawns around him on demand. While a flight above, we stir and stand, aching into the day, 2 middle-aged lovers, stale-breathed in stupor with each other, no longer spinning out our single druthers, each waking up unfree of the other, each man made from the men we are, our skunk, the sweat we made asleep, our spunk. Grieved and aggrieved with contact highs, we kiss good morning and we rise. And here's another love poem, and the title, I think, is kind of the key to this poem, as you'll figure out. It's called Infinitive to Clay. To yelp for no food, to beg just a little, then to loll to get noticed by a master who, to get you to roll over, flicks 2 fingers. Too much to think about too long, the verb thing of uninflected unattachment, taken out of agency, away from object, not at one with a sentence with its sententious intention, yet in an infinite syntax, all sideways figure eights, a sort of square root, but still subject to being a subject or simply a modifier. To live, to be unbound by living, is to sate a hunger to hunger, to say stay, to act as your own act, to lessen deficit, but to be satisfied split, to unite the day and untie tomorrow, to let joy's joy, to tether for yourself togetherness. So one of the challenges for this book, and I'm sure Maggie will speak to this as well with her work when it comes together in a collection, is how it evolves and moves across the course of a book and where the poet and the reader end up. So I was realizing that there's only a certain amount of grief and losses that a life or a book can sustain. And to realize this, and to realize that partly through writing these poems, I was in a different place about all that, was a surprise and something of an indignation, as you may hear in this poem, which is called Grievance. Where did you go, grief? Seems like you want to run away from home. Don't you know my mother is still dead? Didn't you hear my father summon you and bequeath you in his will to me? Don't you know the names of my spent men? Won't you still bury your face in your fists when the dog's choke chain punctures her, the girl eats clay for lunch, or children's bodies blow to shore? You are derelict today, binging on beliefs and newborn babes, a sunny turn of weather or of praise. Where did you put my beleaguerers? What did you do with my asbestos clock? Where's your leaden shawl? Here I am, as if exempt from you, my private belly full, my cells secure, my lover still alive, 1 room away. Come home to me, grief, in your garish, happy costume. Don't leave me to savor the rest of my days. Thanks. So I hope these poems ultimately can kind of rest in suspense. And that's what I was discovering as through the process over the years of writing this. And that's one thing I think in this next poem, which is about bugs. Again, bugs return. And these bugs are box elder bugs, who you'll hear are doing their thing, which they do in public. Box elder bugs have no shame. So that's, prepare yourselves. Turn. The box elder bugs are mating on the sunny stucco wall, their usual urgent orgy, butt to butt in an awkward sex spiral of a dance. They stain if I squash them. Even with crimson underwings, they are mostly unlike choir members in lined robes, though to imagine them singing praise in their vertical church is a nice erotic subversion. When they frig and fly, I almost desire to be them, two that spin as one, to be that headlong, a pas de deux aloft. But still, all that libido, all that balancing on cement, wind current. I am happier to be here, content to stare, a tall human stooping voyeur whose white hair makes him a dusty thistle no insect would hit on. They have no shame. I think of myself and him visible through the limbs in that part of the park where we were seen and wanted to be, though he reclasped his pants and left for good. Rain edges in, drops populate the box elder sky. Maybe I hear thunder, or is it my tinnitus? Either way, a different choir. How weird not to want fusion, butt to butt or otherwise, but instead elect to stay fully clothed, unseen, a single upright person, feet on the ground, my heart beating, not aching, my head in the clouds. So I have just two more poems. And as you'll hear in this next one, my parents keep coming back into the poems, but now I'm asking some different questions. Like a simile. My dead mother sneaks up on me when I don't know I need her. If a tiny piece of masonry, the finger of a gargoyle, falls inside me and I feel its current, she appears without asking, a glint of her sure self, her own person, but mine too. And my body steps ahead, I see my shadow move, as if she's roused me for school, as if I now know what to say. As if, when I'm dying, she will unevanesce at my bedside, a trick of the brain's electric flicker, or like that trick. I've heard that happens, but I've never been close enough to know. I wonder if the trick is all of it, or if the charges of the nerve shutting down is as real as it gets, the parent appearing because she appears. It seems as if she should be there because she was there at the start, the mother of the thing, half of the instigation, the spring of the river that is its own river. I distrust apparitions. I consent to science in my ignorance of it and of spirit. I rely on a rationale for which I have no taxonomy. Unlike faith, I take it on faith. There she is again, or there is her notion. Is she someone you know? Today she sends me off, stronger in my senses, my integument resilient, like it or not. Tomorrow, or in 10 years, I ask you, will she be my docent out? It's as if I see her beckon me beyond my nerves, as if calling me into the car she drives, her left arm out the window, already tanned, the beauty marks darkening. And as she steps on the gas, as if we are late for vacation, my back goes back to stick to the vinyl seat, both of us with eyes on the road, as if because she knows where we went, she knows where we are going. So where are we going? And what do we leave behind? And that's a question I ask a lot, what it means to be generative. It's a particular interest for me as a gay man, and it's partly the topic of this final poem. But before I finish, I want to thank Judy, Maggie Queenie, and everyone who's here tonight, all the people from SoFloPoJo, which I get to say one more time, and so glad to be in the flow with SoFloPoJo. This is my final poem, and I should say the title comes from the penultimate line of a poem you may know by Theodore Roethke called Elegy for Jane, my student thrown by a horse. I with no rights in this matter. All day I have been looking for my children, who I know will never exist. I do not find them in the forms of my students, though I would pluck them out of traffic as if my genes were speaking. Nor are my children my nieces and nephews whose blood bears resemblances to my own, in whom I echo. They have parents to belong to, and I borrow them. Tangled amid the toddlers and strollers, the elementary kids skipping beside their dads to school, the 10-year-olds walking boldly alone past the chanting man and the compost bin, the sullen or screeching teens, all angry angles, their parents, practiced men and women who once as babies might have sat on my lap and now run enterprises. I am where among them? My non-procreation seemed the condition of my freedom. I, who swept from man to man, who lived like a boy, who felt like no one's father, not even his own, who, in the prime of his sperm, suspected his semen was deadly, who saw men of a generation give birth to death, his ejaculations dead ends, ciphers of surges in love, who can't run fast enough to catch the fading train. Still, I feel in the fork of my genes those millions I produce even now, however clamoring to make half the child I will not make, striving inside me as I try to bear the mostly straight world stranger children, offspring owned by no one really, amazing in their incipient decay, stray as leaves and already scattering, running to the risk of the intersection, all of them my letters to God on the street. I let them go ahead of me. Thank you.